Okay, now we're on lightings or glow. These are the light areas. These highlights, center of light, basically everything that involves this lighten and contrast blending modes. So what are lighten blending modes? These are lighten, screen, color dodge, glow dodge, add glow, and lighter color. They are called lighten blending modes because they give light. And next we have contrast blending modes. These are the overlay, soft light, hard light, vivid light, linear light, pin light, and hard mix. They are called contrast blending modes because they provide contrast like the brightness and contrast adjustments. Okay, so let's start with this topic. Alright, let's start with basic lightings. First is center of light. This is like making a reference of your light source. Doing this helps identify the shape of whatever you're coloring. I usually use overlay for this because center of light is a very light effect. Its purpose is to support your shape and coloring. To make this, just get your airbrush. Get a color of choice, preferably something light colored. I'm going light peach, and just put this on the area where the light is hitting. Then just get your blending tool, hit J on your keyboard, and spread these colors. And that's it. It's pretty simple. This is before and this is after. That's center of light. Again, we use this to support the shape of our coloring. Now let's go to SSS or Subsurface Scattering. This one and center of light are pretty much the same. The only thing that differs them is that SSS is a much sharper and stronger in terms of shade and amount of color than center of light. Subsurface scattering is a 3D rendering term. It's basically a lighting result of a light hitting on a surface and that light scattering and hitting every reachable and possible area it can, depending on how strong that light is. That's why these edges right here are quite pure in color. The light is basically spreading on that area, and here is a thin element, so light naturally spreads. Alright, quick recap. Center of light is a very light coloring. SSS is like center of light, but sharper and more pure in color. Both works well with whatever shading you want, and both are okay with just using overlay. Okay, so now let's go to highlights. This is like the most common uses of this lighten and contrast blending modes.
I used to believe that everything can be a highlighter if you're brave enough, but I did this tutorial and boy, I was wrong.
And now let's talk about all these lighten and contrast blending modes. Let's check out the color of our highlights first. I am not using white or an overly saturated color. So first, we are going to talk about the possible blending modes that we could use for highlights. Starting first with a usable lighten blending mode. First off is screen. Basically, screen gives light using the color of choice and provides small brightness. Color dodge gives brightness and a small amount of contrast. Glow dodge gives brightness and a huge amount of contrast. Next is add. This gives a good amount of brightness and a color of choice. Add glow on the other hand gives a lot of brightness and a lot of color. And now let's talk about the possible contrast blending modes that we could use for our highlights. There's overlay, which provides a very strong contrast. Then there's soft light, provides little contrast. There's also hard light. This is like normal but with contrast. Then we have vivid light, which provides contrast and brightness but works differently depending on the light of the layer below. We have linear light, which is like vivid light but works with whatever the light of the layer below. Now let's talk about the blending modes that might not provide a good source of highlights. There's lighten. This basically is gonna work like normal because the rule of lighten is if you are a light color, I will show you. If you are not a light color, I won't show you. but we're doing highlights, so naturally it's just going to work like a pure color. There will be no brightness or no contrast involved, and I don't know if you want that, maybe. And next is pin light. Pin light will provide a very strong amount of color depending on the layer below, and there is almost no brightness and contrast to it. Then there's hard mix, which will only provide white, black, RGB, and CMY colors. There is a chance that you'll get patches of colors depending on the shading of your layer below. There's also lighter color, which is basically Lighten but stronger, and Lighten will work the same as normal because again this only shows whatever is lighter in terms of color. Okay, so my favorite highlight blending modes are Glow Dodge, Add Glow, and Overlay. This all differs depending on the hair color and element that I'm shading. Sometimes I need contrast, sometimes just a pure color, but most of the time I need brightness and contrast. Overlay, on the other hand, is pretty good if I want a matte finish. It works well with black hair. It's hard to see on this example, so let's go here on the clothes. At the inner clothes, yeah, I named it center of light, but with highlights because it's basically the same blending mode. Might as well combine them to save some layer space. So if we go here on Glow Dodge, it's a bright violet, but a shirt doesn't shine like that. So I'll go here on Overlay, which only gives a very light or almost subtle highlights. Alright then, so let's go to the next light topic. Okay, so now let's talk about providing support lights for core and cast shadows. I've talked a little bit about this on the shadow topic, which was a diagonal shadow, so let's have a complicated light source as an example here. This one, for example, basically what I did here was I made a new layer, Ctrl plus Shift plus N, fill that with light gray or whatever my shadow color of choice, then make sure it's clipped to the character. Then I put a mask. I use the special brushes. I choose some leaves and use that leaves brushes to erase some of the grays. And now we're gonna add some lights or some glow effects. Right click the shadow layer, selection from layer, create selection. Now we have all those areas with the leaves shape selected. Make a new layer, Ctrl plus Shift plus N, clip it to the layer below. Change the blending mode to Glow Dodge. Now let's change our foreground color. I'm choosing this light peach. For my glow, let's go to Edit, Outline Selection, and for the settings, draw on border, meaning we will be making an outline on the selection outline itself, not outside or inside. Line width is at 4 because this is a small illustration, 2K by 2K, and deselect, draw on canvas edge, and now just click OK when you're done, and we have now outlined our mask. Make sure you deselect it, Ctrl plus D. Okay, now this is before and this is after. Now we have to soften this outline glow. Let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I blur it around 30 to 40% depending on how big your canvas is. Mine works at 40 and it's done. Before and after. So let's go to the next topic. Let's add some light rays in here. Okay, so now let's talk about light rays. This topic is pretty short as well. Light rays are light streaks, like strips of light coming from above. So let's make a new layer. Ctrl plus Shift plus and set the blending mode to Glow Dodge. Okay, so why am I always using Glow Dodge? Again, Glow Dodge gives light or brightness and a good amount of contrast, and I want that. You can use other light and blending modes. I just really like Glow Dodge. Okay, so now we go to Airbrush. Get your light color. I'm choosing a light peach and just making strokes of light coming from above, going down, and when you're done, go to filter, blur, motion blur. My settings here are pretty random. Strength depends on how blurry I want it to be. In this case, 40% works for me. Angle is depending on my chosen angle. In here, it's negative 72 degrees. And click OK when you're done. If it's too strong, just lower down the opacity. You can still add some more light rays. If you want to do it manually, use a low opacity airbrush and just paint it slowly. If you got the shape too sharp, just use a blending tool. Press J on your keyboard and just blend or blur those colors. And now let's try some RGB lights. Okay, so there's also something like an RGB light rays. I don't know what the right name for this actually, but I use this when there's glass or jewelry involved. So first, let's make a new layer. Control plus Shift plus N. Let's stay on the normal blending mode for now. Get your airbrush. Get your color. Let's start with red because again we are making an RGB light ray. And start making teardrop strokes on where the light is coming from. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? So just make some teardrop strokes, some near the lanterns, some near the sky, and when you're done doing the teardrops, click on Lock Transparent Pixels. This will close and lock all the alpha channels so that you only be able to draw or edit on the teardrops. Since this is an RGB light ray, let's get the next color, which is green, and get your airbrush and start coloring the middle of the teardrops. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, just color it. Then next and final color, which is blue. Get your blue and color the top end of the teardrop. And when you're done, disable the lock transparent pixels, then go to filter, blur, motion blur, and start changing the settings according to what suits you best. I'm going 47% at negative 101 degrees. Then change the blending mode to glow dodge. If some areas feel sharp, just grab your blending tool, press J on your keyboard, and smudge the colors. You can use this for jewelry or when the sun is hitting on a glass window along with some light rays. So that's it. Let's go to the next topic.